The snow fell thick and heavy on that Christmas Eve of 1882, coating the small ranch house outside Cimarron, New Mexico, in a blanket of white that would have been beautiful if it did not feel so much like a shroud. Delilah Reeves sat alone in the darkness of her parlor. The fire burned down to embers, her face wet with tears that would not stop coming no matter how many times she wiped them away with the back of her hand. 3 months. It had been 3 months since Thomas had been thrown from that wild Mustang he was trying to break. 3 months since she had watched the life drain from his eyes while Doc Henderson shook his head and said there was nothing more to be done. The wound to his head had been too severe, and he had died right there in her arms with the sun setting red and angry behind the mountains. Now Christmas had come around, the first one without him, and Delilah felt as though she might drown in the grief that pressed down on her chest like a physical weight. She was 24 years old and already a widow. They had only been married 2 years, 2 beautiful years that now felt like a dream she could barely remember. The ranch that Thomas had built with his own 2 hands felt empty without his laughter, without his voice calling out to her from the barn, without the sound of his boots on the wooden floor when he came in for supper. Everything reminded her of him, and everything hurt. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows in their frames. Delilah pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stared at the dying fire. She should add more wood. She should light the lamp. She should do something other than sit here in the darkness and let the cold seep into her bones, but she could not find the strength to move. What was the point? There was no one to share Christmas with, no one to cook for, no one who cared whether she lived or died out here on this lonely stretch of land. Her family was back in Missouri, and they had not approved of her marrying Thomas and moving out west. They had written once after his death, a stiff, formal letter expressing condolences but making no offer to help her or invite her home. She was on her own, just as she had been since she buried her husband in the plot behind the house, where the pine trees grew tall and straight. A knock at the door startled her so badly that she gasped, her hand flying to her throat. For a moment she sat frozen, wondering if she had imagined it. Who would be out on a night like this? Who would come to her door on Christmas Eve? The knock came again, louder this time, and a man's voice called out, "Hello? Is anyone home? I am sorry to bother you, but I saw your light and my horse has gone lame. I need shelter from the storm." Delilah stood slowly, her legs stiff from sitting so long in the cold. She hesitated, her hand on the back of the chair. It was not safe to open your door to strangers out here, not for a woman alone. But it was Christmas Eve, and the storm was getting worse. She could hear it in the wind, in the way the house creaked and groaned. To turn a man away on a night like this would be as good as killing him. She made her way to the door, her heart pounding, and lifted the heavy wooden bar. When she pulled the door open, snow swirled in along with a blast of frigid air. Standing on her porch was a man covered in snow from his hat to his boots, his face red with cold, his eyes squinting against the wind. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and even through the layers of his coat, she could see he was built strong. He looked to be in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled out from under his hat and a few days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "Madam," he said, and his voice was rough but polite. "I am real sorry to intrude on your Christmas Eve, but like I said, my horse has gone lame about a quarter-mile back. I have been walking and I saw your light. I would be grateful for shelter until the storm passes. I can sleep in your barn if you have one. I do not want to be any trouble." Delilah looked past him into the swirling white darkness. She could barely see beyond the porch. "Your horse is still out there?" "Yes, madam. I got him tied to a tree out of the worst of the wind." He cannot walk on that leg right now, but he will be all right until morning if I can get him under cover then. She should not do this. She should not let a stranger into her home. But something in his eyes made her think he was telling the truth, and the tears were still wet on her face, and she was so very tired of being alone. "Come inside," she said, stepping back. "You will freeze to death out there." "Thank you, madam, truly." He stepped over the threshold, bringing the smell of cold air and horses with him. Snow fell from his coat onto her floor, melting immediately into puddles. "I am Quentin Dalton. I have been traveling from Colorado, heading down to Santa Fe for work." "Delilah Reeves," she said, closing the door behind him and dropping the bar back into place. The sudden absence of the wind made the house feel very quiet. "I will get the fire built back up. You look half frozen." "I am obliged." He pulled off his hat and gloves, and she could see his hands were red and raw from the cold. "I have some supplies in my pack. I can contribute to supper if you will have me." "I have not made supper," Delilah admitted. She had not eaten all day, had not felt hungry at all. "But I have stew left from yesterday. I can heat it up." She busied herself with the fire, adding wood until the flames crackled and leaped, pushing back the cold and the darkness. Behind her, she could hear Quentin moving around, taking off his heavy coat and setting down his pack. When she turned around, he was standing by the fire, holding his hands out to the warmth. In the light, she could see him better. He had a strong, honest face, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent outdoors. His clothes were worn but clean, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man used to hard work. "I apologize for my appearance," Delilah said suddenly, aware that her face must be blotchy from crying, her hair falling loose from its pins. "I was not expecting company." "You do not need to apologize to me, madam. I am the one who showed up on your doorstep uninvited." He looked around the dark house, taking in the lack of decorations, the cold emptiness of it. "Are you here alone?" "Yes." The word came out harder than she intended. "My husband died 3 months ago. It is just me now." Understanding dawned in his eyes, and something else too, sympathy but not pity. "I am sorry for your loss. That is a hard thing, especially this time of year." "Yes." Delilah turned away, not wanting him to see the fresh tears that threatened. "I will get that stew." She went to the kitchen, grateful for something to do with her hands. The stew was in the pot where she had left it yesterday, and she carried it to the fireplace and hung it on the hook over the flames. While it heated, she moved around lighting lamps, bringing the house back to life bit by bit. Quentin stood by the fire, warming himself, watching her with those steady eyes. "You should not be alone out here," he said after a while. "A woman on her own, it is not safe. I do not have anywhere else to go." Delilah stirred the stew, watching the surface begin to steam. "This is my home. My husband built it. I cannot just leave it." "I did not mean you should leave. I just meant, well, it is a hard life." "Life is hard everywhere, Mr. Dalton. At least here I have a roof over my head and land under my feet." "Yes, madam, you are right about that." They ate in silence, sitting at her small kitchen table. The stew was simple, just beef and vegetables, but Quentin ate like a man who had not had a hot meal in days. Delilah found that having someone across from her made her own appetite return, and she ate more than she had in weeks. The wind continued to howl outside, but inside, with the fire blazing and the lamps lit, the house felt almost cozy. "This is good," Quentin said, sopping up the last of his stew with a piece of bread. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Reeves. You did not have to take me in." "You do not have to be alone," Delilah said, and then blinked, surprised at her own words. "I mean, no one should be out in a storm like that. It would not be Christian to turn you away on Christmas Eve." He smiled at her, and it was a good smile, warm and genuine. "Well, I appreciate your Christian charity then. After they finished eating, Delilah cleared the dishes while Quentin brought in more wood from the stack on the porch, enough to keep the fire going through the night. She made up a bed for him on the floor near the fireplace, bringing out quilts and a pillow from the chest in her bedroom. It was strange having a man in the house again, but not in a bad way, just different. The loneliness that had been crushing her all day felt lighter somehow, pushed back by his presence. "I will head out to my horse first thing in the morning," Quentin said as he settled down on the makeshift bed. "Check on him and see if I can get him back here to your barn. If his leg is not too bad, I will be out of your way by tomorrow afternoon." "There is no need to rush off," Delilah said, and then felt her face flush. "I mean, if the storm keeps up, you should wait until it is safe to travel. That is kind of you." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "You are a brave woman, Mrs. Reeves, living out here on your own, making it work. Your husband would be proud." The tears came again, sudden and hot, and Delilah turned away quickly. "Good night, Mr. Dalton." "Good night, madam." She retreated to her bedroom and closed the door, leaning against it in the darkness. She could hear the fire crackling beyond, hear the faint sound of Quentin settling in for the night. For the first time since Thomas died, she did not feel completely alone in the world, and that realization made her cry even harder, though these tears felt different somehow. Less like grief and more like relief. The storm raged all night, and Delilah slept poorly, waking often to hear the wind shrieking around the house. But each time she woke, she could hear the fire still burning, and she knew Quentin must be tending it, keeping them warm and safe. There was something comforting in that, in knowing someone else was there, someone strong and capable who could help shoulder the burden of survival that she had been carrying alone for so long. When she emerged from her bedroom the next morning, the storm had died down to a light snow. Quentin was already awake, the fire built up high, and he had coffee brewing in her pot. The smell of it filled the house, rich and wonderful. "Merry Christmas," he said when he saw her. "I hope you do not mind. I found your coffee and figured we could both use some." "Merry Christmas," Delilah replied, accepting the cup he poured for her. She had forgotten it was Christmas morning. "Thank you." They ate a simple breakfast of eggs and biscuits, and then Quentin pulled on his coat and hat. "I am going to go check on my horse. If I am not back in an hour, well, I probably got lost in the snow, so you might want to come looking." He said it with a smile, trying to be funny, but Delilah felt a sudden spike of fear. "Be careful, the snow can be disorienting." "I will, I promise." She watched from the window as he trudged away through the knee-deep snow, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared into the white landscape. The house felt immediately emptier without him, and Delilah found herself pacing, unable to settle. She washed the dishes, tidied the kitchen, added wood to the fire, all the while keeping one eye on the window. He was back within the hour, as promised, leading a large bay horse that was limping badly. Delilah hurried to open the barn for him, and together they got the horse settled in one of the empty stalls. Thomas's horses had been sold off after his death, all except for her gentle mare, Honey, who nickered a greeting from her own stall. "His leg is strained, not broken," Quentin said, examining the horse's foreleg carefully. "He needs rest and cold compresses. He will be fine in a few days, but I cannot ride him until then." "Then you will have to stay," Delilah said. The words came out too quickly, too eagerly, and she felt her face heat. "I mean, you cannot walk to Santa Fe in this weather." "No, I cannot." Quentin looked at her, his dark eyes serious. "Are you sure, Mrs. Reeves? I do not want to impose on you." A widow alone and a strange man staying in her house. People might talk. Let them talk. There is no one around here to see anyway. The nearest neighbor is 5 miles away. Delilah lifted her chin. "You are welcome to stay until your horse is well enough to travel. Then I accept. And I will earn my keep. I can see you have things that need doing around here. That fence out by the road is falling down and your barn door does not hang right. I can fix those things. You do not have to do that. I want to. It is the least I can do for your hospitality." They walked back to the house together, their boots crunching in the fresh snow. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, sending weak shafts of light across the white landscape. Everything looked clean and new, and Delilah felt something shift inside her chest, some tight knot of grief loosening just a little. Over the next few days, Quentin proved himself to be a man of his word. He fixed the fence and the barn door, repaired a loose board on the porch steps, and patched a leak in the roof of the chicken coop that Delilah had not even known was there. He worked from sunrise to sunset, only coming in for meals and when the cold grew too bitter. Delilah found herself cooking more, putting effort into the meals in a way she had not since Thomas died. She made biscuits and gravy, roasted chicken, even a dried apple pie that turned out better than she expected. They fell into an easy routine, working alongside each other during the day and sitting by the fire in the evenings. Quentin told her stories about his travels, about working on ranches in Colorado and Wyoming, about the wild country he had seen and the people he had met. Delilah found herself telling him about Missouri, about her childhood on her father's farm, about meeting Thomas at a church social, and knowing immediately that he was the one she wanted to marry. "He was a good man," she said one evening, staring into the fire. "He worked so hard on this place, had so many plans for the future. He wanted to build up the herd, wanted to eventually have enough cattle to drive them to market himself. He wanted children, a whole house full of them." Her voice broke. "And then he was just gone. One moment he was alive and smiling, and the next he was lying in the dirt with blood on his face, and there was nothing I could do." Quentin reached over and took her hand, his grip warm and strong. "It was not your fault. Sometimes bad things just happen, no matter how careful we are. I know that in my head, but my heart keeps asking why. Why him? Why now? Why did I have to lose him when we had barely started our life together? I do not have answers for you. I wish I did." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I can tell you this. You are stronger than you know, Delilah Reeves. You have kept this place running all on your own. You have survived the worst thing that can happen to a person. That takes strength." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the kindness in his eyes, the genuine care in his expression. "Why are you being so nice to me? You do not even know me." "Maybe that is why. Because I do not know you, so I can see you clearly, without all the history and baggage that the people who knew you before see. I see a woman who is hurting but not broken. A woman who is brave enough to keep going even when it would be easier to give up." He released her hand and looked back at the fire. "And maybe because I know what it is like to be alone." "You do." "I have been drifting for 5 years now, ever since my parents died of fever back in Kansas. I had a sweetheart once, a girl named Margaret, but she married someone else when I told her I wanted to go west. Said she was not going to wait around for a man with no prospects. So I have been on my own ever since, working where I can, moving on when the work dries up. It is a lonely way to live." "Then why do you do it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I guess I have been looking for something, a place that feels like home, a reason to stay put. I have not found it yet. Maybe you will in Santa Fe, maybe." But he did not sound convinced. The days turned into a week, and Quentin's horse healed slowly but steadily. Delilah knew she should be glad, knew that soon he would leave and she would have her solitude back. But instead, she found herself dreading the moment when he would announce he was ready to go. She had grown used to his presence, to the sound of his voice, to the way he made her laugh with his stories. The house felt alive again with him in it, and she was not ready to let that go. On New Year's Eve, they sat together by the fire after supper, listening to the wind outside. It was not as fierce as the storm that had brought Quentin to her door, but it was cold enough to keep them inside. Delilah had found a bottle of whiskey that Thomas had kept for special occasions, and she poured them each a small glass. "To the new year," Quentin said, raising his glass. "May it be better than the last." "To the new year," Delilah echoed, and they drank. The whiskey burned going down, warming her from the inside. She felt light-headed, though whether from the alcohol or from Quentin's proximity she could not say. He had moved closer to her on the sofa, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body, smell the clean scent of the soap he had used to wash up before supper. "Delilah," he said, and the way he said her name made her breath catch. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "My horse is well enough to travel, has been for 2 days now." He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. "But I have not left because I do not want to. I do not want to leave you here alone. I do not want to go back to drifting and being by myself." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "Quentin, I do not understand what you are saying." "I am saying that I have feelings for you. I know it is too soon. I know you are still grieving your husband, and I know I have no right to say any of this. But I cannot leave without telling you the truth." He reached out and took her hand again, his touch gentle. "These past 2 weeks have been the best I have had in years. You make me want to stay in one place, put down roots, build a life. You make me want to be a better man." Delilah felt tears spilling down her cheeks, but for once they were not tears of grief. "I have feelings for you too. I did not want to admit it, felt like I was betraying Thomas's memory by caring for someone else so soon. But I cannot help it, Quentin. When you are here, I feel like I can breathe again. When you are gone, even just out in the barn, I miss you. Then let me stay. Let me help you run this ranch. Let me court you properly, take the time to do this right." His voice was urgent now, his eyes searching her face. "I do not have much to offer you except my hands and my back and my heart, but they are all yours if you want them." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want you to stay." He kissed her then, soft and careful, and Delilah felt something inside her that had been frozen since Thomas died begin to thaw. This was different from what she had had with Thomas, but it was no less real. This was a second chance, a new beginning, and she was not going to let fear or guilt keep her from taking it. They spent New Year's Day making plans for the ranch. Quentin had experience with cattle and horses, and he had ideas about how to improve the place, how to make it profitable again. Delilah found herself getting excited, seeing a future that extended beyond just surviving day to day. They could breed horses, he suggested. There was good grazing land here, and if they were smart about it, they could build a reputation for quality stock. "It will take time," he cautioned, "and it will be hard work, but I think we can make it succeed." "We," Delilah repeated, loving the sound of that word. "I have been alone so long, I forgot what it was like to be part of a we." "You will never be alone again," Quentin promised. "Not if I have anything to say about it." True to his word, Quentin courted her properly over the next few months. He slept in the barn, despite the cold, insisting that it would not be proper for them to live under the same roof unmarried. He brought her wildflowers when they started blooming in the spring, helped her plant a vegetable garden, rode into town with her when she needed supplies. The townspeople of Cimarron gossiped, of course, but Delilah found she did not care. She had been so miserable for so long, and now she was happy again. She was not going to apologize for that. In April, Quentin rode to Santa Fe and came back with a simple gold ring. He proposed to her properly, down on one knee in the parlor, and Delilah said yes with tears streaming down her face. They were married in May by the circuit preacher who passed through Cimarron once a month. It was a simple ceremony with just a few neighbors as witnesses, but to Delilah it felt as meaningful as any grand wedding. She wore her mother's dress, altered to fit her, and Quentin wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back and his face freshly shaved. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Quentin kissed her in front of everyone, and Delilah felt her heart swell with happiness. This was her second chance at love, and she was not going to take a single moment of it for granted. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Quentin careful with her, making sure she was comfortable every step of the way. It was different from her nights with Thomas, but that was all right. This was a new chapter of her life, and she was allowed to let it be different. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, Quentin's arms around her, and Delilah felt more at peace than she had in a year. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance, for letting me into your life. I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. You already do." They worked hard that spring and summer, building up the ranch together. Quentin was as good as his word, working from dawn to dusk, never complaining. They bought 3 mares and a stallion, good, strong animals with solid bloodlines, and began breeding horses. It was a gamble, but it was one they were willing to take together. Delilah handled the business end of things, keeping the books and making sure they stayed within budget, while Quentin did the physical work of training and caring for the animals. By the time autumn came around, they had sold 2 young horses for a good profit, and they were starting to get a reputation in the area. People came from as far as Santa Fe to look at their stock. It was exhausting work, but it was also deeply satisfying. Delilah went to bed every night tired but happy, secure in the knowledge that she had a partner who would stand by her through anything. In October, she realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was just stress or all the hard work, but when another month passed with no sign of them, she began to hope. She did not say anything to Quentin at first, not wanting to get his hopes up if she was wrong, but by November she was sure. She was carrying his child. She told him on Thanksgiving after they had finished a simple dinner of roast chicken and potatoes. "I have something to tell you," she said, her hands shaking slightly as she set down her fork. "What is it?" Quentin looked concerned. "Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant." For a moment he just stared at her, his face blank with shock. Then a huge smile broke across his face and he jumped up from his chair, pulling her into his arms. "You are serious. We are going to have a baby." "Yes," Delilah laughed, hugging him tight. "In late spring, I think. April or May." "That is the best news I have ever had in my entire life." He kissed her, hard and fast, and then knelt down and pressed his face against her still flat belly. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Delilah ran her fingers through his hair, feeling tears prick her eyes again. She seemed to cry at everything these days, but these were happy tears. Thomas had wanted children so badly, and she knew he would have been overjoyed to know that she was finally going to be a mother, even if it was not his child she was carrying. She liked to think he would be happy for her, would approve of Quentin and the life they were building together. The winter was hard, as winters always were in New Mexico, but they weathered it together. Quentin was endlessly patient with her as her body changed, helping her with tasks that became too difficult as her belly grew. He built a cradle for the baby, carving it from pine wood and sanding it smooth as glass so there would be no splinters. Delilah sewed tiny gowns and blankets, her heart full of anticipation. Christmas came around again, and this time when it snowed, Delilah did not weep. Instead, She stood at the window with Quentin's arms around her, watching the fat flakes fall, and remembered that night a year ago when he had knocked on her door. If he had not been caught in that storm, if his horse had not gone lame, they never would have met. Their lives never would have intertwined. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin asked, his breath warm against her ear. "About how you knocked on my door that night and said I did not have to be alone," Delilah said softly. "You were right. I do not have to be alone anymore. I have you, and soon we will have our baby." "Best Christmas present I ever got," Quentin murmured, his hand coming to rest on her swollen belly. "Finding you. I found you too, or maybe we found each other. Either way, I am grateful." The baby came in late April, on a warm spring morning when the world was green and new. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next day, and Delilah thought more than once that she might not survive it. But Quentin was there the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, telling her she was strong and brave and that she could do this. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, the midwife from town who had come to help announced, "It is a boy, a healthy boy." Delilah collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. A boy. She had a son. Quentin had a son. The midwife cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket, then placed him in Delilah's arms. He was perfect, with a thatch of dark hair and eyes that looked up at her with unfocused wonder. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I am your mama." Quentin leaned over them both, his face awestruck. "He is beautiful, he is perfect." He looked at Delilah with so much love in his eyes that it made her chest ache. "You are amazing, you did so well." "We need to name him," Delilah said. They had discussed names over the winter but had never quite settled on one. "What about William?" Quentin suggested. "After your father." "William Thomas Dalton," Delilah said, adding Thomas's name as a middle name. It felt right, honoring both the past and the present. "Billy for short. Billy Dalton, I like that." Quentin reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand, and Billy's fingers curled around his father's finger instinctively. "He has got a good grip. He is going to be a strong one. Just like his father." The midwife stayed for a few days to make sure Delilah was recovering properly, and then she rode back to town, leaving them alone with their new son. Those first weeks were exhausting in a whole new way, with Billy waking every few hours to nurse. But Delilah had never been happier. Quentin was a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby, changing diapers and walking the floor when Billy was fussy so Delilah could rest. "I never knew it could be like this," he said one night as they sat together in the parlor, Billy asleep in the cradle beside them. "Having a family, a real home. I spent so long just drifting that I forgot what it was like to belong somewhere." "You belong here," Delilah said firmly. "With us. This is your home now, Quentin, forever." "Forever," he echoed and kissed her softly. "I like the sound of that." As Billy grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Their horses gained a reputation for being well-trained and reliable, and they had more buyers than they could handle. Quentin hired a hand to help with the work, a young man from town named Jake who was eager to learn the horse trade. With the extra help, they were able to expand their operation, breeding more horses and taking on training jobs from ranchers in the area. Delilah kept the books and managed the household, all while chasing after Billy, who was walking by his first birthday and getting into everything. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and he was the light of both their lives. Quentin taught him to ride almost as soon as he could walk, setting him on the back of Delilah's gentle mare and leading them around the yard while Billy shrieked with laughter. "He is a natural," Quentin said proudly. "He has no fear at all." "That is what worries me," Delilah replied, but she was smiling as she watched them. When Billy was 2, Delilah found herself pregnant again. This time she knew the signs immediately, and she was not surprised when her suspicions were confirmed. She told Quentin on their anniversary, and his reaction was the same as before, all joy and excitement. "Another baby," he said wonderingly. "Our family is growing. Are you happy?" Delilah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am blessed. I am the luckiest man alive." Their second child, a daughter, was born in the spring of 1886. The labor was easier this time, and the baby came quickly, arriving just before dawn. She had Delilah's blonde hair and Quentin's dark eyes, and they named her Rose Marie, after Quentin's mother. Billy was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to hold her and touch her constantly. Quentin had to remind him to be gentle, that Rose was very small and fragile. But Billy took to his role as big brother with enthusiasm, always wanting to help feed her or rock her cradle. "I have to protect her," he announced seriously when Rose was just a few weeks old. "That is what big brothers do." "That is right," Quentin said, ruffling his son's hair. "You are a good big brother, Billy." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch was successful, the children were healthy and happy, and Delilah and Quentin's love for each other only deepened with time. They had their challenges, of course. There were droughts and harsh winters, horses that got sick, buyers who backed out of deals. But they faced everything together as a team, and that made all the difference. On Christmas Eve of 1886, Delilah stood in the same spot where she had stood 4 years earlier, looking out at the falling snow. But this time she was not alone. Quentin stood beside her with Rose in his arms, and Billy was at her feet, pressing his nose against the cold glass. The house was warm and bright, decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. A goose was roasting in the oven, and there were presents wrapped in brown paper under the little tree Quentin had cut and brought inside. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin asked, just as he had all those years ago. "I am thinking about how much can change in 4 years," Delilah said softly. 4 years ago, I was sitting in the dark, crying, thinking my life was over. And then you knocked on my door. Best decision I ever made, stopping at your house that night. You said I did not have to be alone, and you were right. I'm not alone anymore. I have you and Billy and Rose. I have a family and a home and a life worth living." She turned to look at him, tears in her eyes but a smile on her face. "I am so grateful for you, Quentin. For everything you have given me. You gave me just as much, more even. You gave me a reason to stop running and start building something real." He leaned over and kissed her, careful not to jostle the sleeping baby in his arms. "I love you, Delilah Dalton. I love you too." Billy tugged on her skirt. "Mama, when can we open presents?" "Tomorrow morning, like always," Delilah said, laughing. "Now come on, let us get you to bed so that Santa can come." They put the children to bed and then sat together by the fire, just the two of them, holding hands and watching the flames dance. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, but inside everything was warm and perfect. Delilah thought about Thomas sometimes, remembered him with love and sadness, but she no longer felt guilty about moving on. She knew he would have wanted her to be happy, would have wanted her to find love again. "You ever regret it?" she asked Quentin suddenly. "Giving up your wandering ways to settle down here with me?" "Not for a single second," he said without hesitation. "This is where I was always meant to be. I just had to find you first. I am glad you found me. Me too." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Billy grew into a tall, strong boy who was as comfortable on horseback as he was on his own 2 feet. Rose became a beautiful, spirited girl who had her mother's kindness and her father's determination. They had one more child, another boy they named Jacob Henry, who was born in 1889 and completed their family. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. They bought more land, built a bigger barn, hired more hands. Quentin's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout New Mexico and beyond, and they had people coming from Texas and Arizona to buy their stock. Delilah kept everything organized and running smoothly, her business sense proving just as valuable as Quentin's horsemanship. But despite their success, they never forgot where they had come from, never took their good fortune for granted. Every Christmas Eve, when the snow fell, Delilah would tell their children the story of how she and Quentin had met, about the storm and the knock on the door and the stranger who had become her husband. "Papa saved Mama," Billy would say, his eyes wide. "No," Quentin would correct gently. "We saved each other." And that was the truth. Delilah had given Quentin a home and a purpose, and he had given her hope when she thought she had none left. They had built a life together from the ashes of grief and loneliness, and it was more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. In the summer of 1892, they celebrated their 10th anniversary with a party at the ranch. All their friends and neighbors came, along with the hands who worked for them and their families. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. Billy, now 9 years old, played his fiddle that he had been learning, while Rose, 6, danced with her little brother Jacob, who was 3 and barely able to keep his feet. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Quentin pulled Delilah away from the crowd and led her to the spot behind the house where Thomas was buried. The grave was well tended, with wildflowers growing around the simple wooden cross. "I wanted to come here," Quentin said quietly, "to thank him for loving you, for building this place, for everything he did that made it possible for us to have the life we have now." Quentin looked at the grave with respect. "I know I never met him, but I am grateful to him nonetheless. He was your first love, and that is nothing to be ashamed of. I hope he knows that I have taken good care of you, that I love you with everything I have." Delilah felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were not sad tears. "He would like you, I think. You are a good man, Quentin Dalton, the best man I know. I try to be. For you, for our children, for the life we are building together." They stood there for a while in silence, paying their respects, and then they walked back to the party hand in hand. The children ran to greet them, Billy with his fiddle still in hand, Rose with flowers in her hair, and Jacob toddling along behind on his chubby little legs. Quentin scooped up Jacob and swung him onto his shoulders, making the little boy squeal with delight, while Delilah gathered Rose into her arms. "Are you happy, Mama?" Rose asked, her small hand patting Delilah's cheek. "I am very happy, sweetheart. Happier than I ever thought I could be." And it was true. Life was not always easy, and there were still hard days when the grief of losing Thomas would sneak up on her unexpectedly, but those moments were fewer and farther between now. Most days were filled with laughter and love, with the noise of children playing and the satisfaction of hard work done well. Most days were filled with Quentin, his steady presence, his quick smile, his unwavering support. As the years went on, Billy grew into a fine young man who took over much of the horse training, working alongside his father with a natural skill that made them both proud. Rose became a beautiful young woman with a kind heart and a sharp mind, helping her mother with the household and the books. And Jacob, the baby of the family, showed an early aptitude for mechanics and spent his time taking apart and putting back together anything he could get his hands on. Quentin's hair started to gray at the temples, and Delilah found lines appearing around her eyes, but they aged gracefully together, still as in love as they had been that first Christmas when he had knocked on her door. They had built something lasting, something real, and they both knew how rare and precious that was. One evening in the late spring of 1895, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Quentin turned to Delilah and said, "Do you remember what I said that first night? When I knocked on your door, you said your horse had gone lame and you needed shelter," Delilah replied, smiling. "No, after that, when you told me you were alone." Delilah thought back, remembering. "You said you do not have to be alone." "That is right, and you do not, Delilah. You never have to be alone again, not as long as I am alive. I know that. I have always known that." She reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "You have kept that promise every single day since, and I will keep on keeping it. For as long as I live." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sounds of their children, Billy's deep voice telling a story, Rose's laughter, Jacob's excited questions. These were the sounds of home, of family, of a life well lived. Delilah thought back to that terrible Christmas Eve 13 years ago, when she had been drowning in grief and loneliness, when she had thought she would never be happy again. She thought about the knock on the door that had changed everything, about the stranger with kind eyes who had become her husband, her partner, her best friend. She thought about how close she had come to not opening that door, to turning him away because she was afraid. "What are you thinking about?" Quentin asked, and she realized she was crying again, though these tears were ones of gratitude and joy. "I am thinking about how glad I am that it snowed that night, how glad I am that your horse went lame, how glad I am that you knocked on my door instead of someone else's. I am glad too. Every single day I am glad. You think we will have more Christmases like that first one, unexpected, life-changing?" "I think every Christmas with you is life-changing," Quentin said, his voice warm with affection. "But I hope we do not have any more blizzards that leave me stranded on foot. I am getting too old for that." Delilah laughed, wiping her eyes. "You are not old. You are seasoned. Seasoned." "I like that." He pulled her closer and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Delilah Dalton, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow. I love you too, always." As the years continued to pass, their love never diminished. They watched Billy marry a sweet girl from town and start a family of his own, building a house on the far edge of their property so he could continue working with the horses. Rose married a school teacher who had come to Cimarron from back east, and they moved into town but visited often. Jacob surprised everyone by going to college in Santa Fe to study engineering, though he came home every summer to help with the ranch. Delilah and Quentin became grandparents, and then great-grandparents, their family growing and spreading like the branches of a great tree. The ranch remained successful, passed down through the generations, and the name Dalton became synonymous with quality horses throughout the territory and later the state of New Mexico. But through it all, through every triumph and tragedy, every joy and sorrow, Delilah and Quentin remained each other's constant. They had found each other in the darkness of a winter storm, two lonely souls who had needed each other more than they could have known. And they had built a life together that was fuller and richer than either of them had dared to dream. On a cold December evening in 1910, Delilah and Quentin celebrated their 58th Christmas together. They were old now, their hair white, their faces lined with age, but their love was as strong as ever. They sat by the fire in the same parlor where they had spent that first Christmas, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter and life. After everyone had gone home or to bed, Delilah and Quentin sat alone together, just as they had so many times before. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside it was snowing, fat white flakes falling softly from the sky. "It is snowing," Delilah observed, looking out the window. "Just like that first night. So it is." Quentin smiled, the wrinkles around his eyes deepening. "Seems fitting, does it not? Very fitting." She turned to look at him, this man who had changed her life so completely. "If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts, the grief, the struggle, the years when we did not know if we would make it, not even those. Because they made us who we are. They taught us to appreciate what we have, to never take each other for granted." She reached out and took his weathered hand in hers. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Quentin Dalton. That Christmas when you knocked on my door was the beginning of the rest of my life. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know I needed." They kissed, a soft, gentle kiss that held within it 58 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Merry Christmas, my love," Delilah whispered. "Merry Christmas," Quentin replied. "And thank you for opening that door all those years ago. Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for knocking. Thank you for telling me I did not have to be alone. You never have to be alone, not ever." They sat together in the warm glow of the firelight, watching the snow fall outside their window. Two souls who had found each other in the darkness and had spent the rest of their lives creating light together. They had weathered every storm, celebrated every joy, and built a legacy that would outlast them both. And when the spring came and the snow melted and the wildflowers began to bloom, Delilah and Quentin were still there, still together, still in love. They spent their days on the porch, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard, remembering all the years they had shared and grateful for every single one. Delilah passed peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1912, with Quentin holding her hand. She was 64 years old and had lived a long, full life. Quentin followed her just 3 months later, dying in the same bed they had shared for so many years, his last words a whispered, "I am coming, my love. Wait for me." They were buried together behind the house, not far from where Thomas lay. The whole town came to the funeral, along with family members from across the state. Billy, now an old man himself, gave the eulogy, speaking of his parents' great love story and the example they had set for all of them. "My father knocked on my mother's door one Christmas Eve, and in doing so, he knocked on all our doors," Billy said, his voice strong despite his tears. "He showed us what it means to love someone with your whole heart, to stand by them through everything, to build a life together brick by brick, and never give up. My parents were not perfect, but their love was as close to perfect as anything I have ever seen. And because of that love, all of us are here today. We are their legacy, and we will carry their story forward for generations to come." And they did. The story of how Delilah and Quentin met became family legend, passed down from parents to children to grandchildren. The ranch remained in the family, thriving through wars and depressions and changing times. And every Christmas Eve, when the snow fell in Cimarron, New Mexico, someone in the Dalton family would tell the story of the widow who wept alone and the cowboy who knocked on her door and said, "You do not have to be alone." It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of love found in the most unexpected places and times. It was a story of two people who had been lost and found each other, who had taken their pain and grief and loneliness and transformed it into something beautiful and lasting. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that even in our darkest moments, hope can knock on our door. We just have to be brave enough to open it. And so the legacy of Delilah and Quentin Dalton lived on, a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of taking chances, and the truth that we never have to face life's storms alone. Their love story became woven into the very fabric of the land they had worked so hard to build, a permanent part of the history of Cimarron and the Wild West they had called home. The ranch house still stands today, restored and preserved by the descendants of Billy, Rose, and Jacob. Visitors come from all over to hear the story and see where it all began. That simple parlor where a grieving widow opened her door to a stranger on a snowy Christmas Eve and found not just shelter for him, but salvation for herself. In the end, that was the true magic of their story. Not that they fell in love, though that was remarkable enough. Not that they built a successful ranch and raised a beautiful family, though those were worthy accomplishments. The true magic was that in finding each other, they found themselves. They discovered that grief does not have to be the end, that loneliness does not have to be forever, that second chances are possible if we are brave enough to take them. Quentin could have ridden past that house in the storm, could have kept going until he found another place to shelter. Delilah could have kept her door barred, could have let her fear override her compassion. But they both made the choice to reach out, to take a risk, to open themselves up to possibility. And that choice changed everything, not just for them, but for all the lives they would touch and all the generations that would come after them. Their story was a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, that the darkest nights can give way to the brightest dawns, and that love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. It was a story that spoke to the resilience of the human spirit and the redemptive power of connection. And so, more than a century after that fateful Christmas Eve, the story of Delilah and Quentin Dalton continues to inspire. It reminds us that we are never truly alone, that help can come from the most unexpected sources, and that opening our hearts to others, even when we are hurting, can lead to the greatest joys life has to offer. The snow still falls on Cimarron every winter, blanketing the mountains and valleys in white. And somewhere in that snow, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the echo of a knock on a door and a voice saying, "You do not have to be alone." It is a message that resonates across time, a promise that love and connection are always possible, no matter how dark the night or how cold the storm. Delilah and Quentin's love story proved that endings can become beginnings, that grief can give way to joy, and that sometimes the person who saves us is the one we save in return. They showed that home is not just a place but a person, that family is built on love and commitment rather than just blood, and that the greatest adventures often begin with a simple act of kindness on a cold winter's night. Their legacy lives on in every marriage that weathers difficult times, in every person who takes a chance on love after loss, in every act of compassion shown to a stranger in need. They left behind not just descendants and a successful ranch, but a blueprint for how to live a life of meaning, purpose, and deep, abiding love. And so we remember them, these two souls who found each other when they needed it most, who built a life together from nothing but hope and hard work, and an unshakable commitment to one another. We remember the widow who wept alone on Christmas night, and the cowboy who knocked and said, "You do not have to be alone." We remember how that single moment of connection blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, creating ripples that still touch lives today. Their story teaches us that it is never too late to start over, never too late to find love, never too late to choose hope over despair. It teaches us that the people who come into our lives, even unexpectedly, can change everything. And it teaches us that the greatest gift we can give each other is the assurance that we do not have to face our struggles alone. In the end, That was what Quentin gave Delilah that snowy Christmas Eve, and what she gave back to him in return. Not just shelter from the storm, not just food and warmth, but something far more valuable. They gave each other a reason to hope again, to dream again, to believe that the future could be better than the past. They gave each other a second chance at happiness, and they seized it with both hands and never let go. And that, more than anything, is why their story endures. Because we all need that reminder sometimes that we do not have to be alone, that connection is possible, that love can bloom even in the harshest winters of our lives. We need to know that opening our doors and our hearts, even when we are afraid, even when we have been hurt before, can lead to the kind of joy and fulfillment that makes life worth living. Delilah and Quentin Dalton knew that truth, lived it every day of their long marriage, and passed it down to everyone who came after them. Their love was a light in the darkness, a warmth in the cold, a promise that better days were always possible. And that light still shines today, guiding lost souls home, reminding broken hearts that they can heal, and proving that sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a knock on a door and a simple offer of kindness on a snowy Christmas night.